the state tightened its grip. The police searches aren't random, by the way. They are messages that some boundaries remain forbidden, not to be crossed or tampered with. The pattern of confrontation around Bobi Wine's campaigns isn't just about one man. It's about the state's relationship with dissent, about a system that sees opposition not as part of democracy, but as a threat to be contained. Again, that the more the state tries to silence Bobi Wine's voice in the north, the louder it echoes across the nation, unfortunately. If you follow Bobi Wine's campaigns across Uganda, you notice something curious. In central Uganda, in places like Masaka, Mukona, and even parts of Kampala, his rallies may be tense, but they often end in cheers, songs, and red berets lifted high. The police presence is there, yes, but mostly watching. Head further to the eastern part of Uganda, that is Jinja, Mbale, and you find more of the same. Crowds swell, speeches are made, tear gas sometimes flies, but life moves on. And then travel to the northern part of Uganda and something drastically changes. I'm telling you guys. In northern Uganda, his arrivals feel different, honestly speaking. They feel heavier, they feel tense. The air oftentimes thickens with suspicion. Before he even steps onto the podium, checkpoints rise, police trucks line the streets, his cars are searched, his team is interrogated. It's as if the campaign trail suddenly transforms into a military operation. And almost every time it ends the same way. Chaos, confrontation, or worse, like the Arua incident in 2018, where we all saw Bobi Wine's driver lose his life. The same story repeating itself. A candidate on a trail, a message of change, and a system that meets it with force. But the question is, why? What does the northern part of Uganda, more than everywhere else, draw out the state's heaviest hand? Is it history, and that is to say the ghosts of wars and the power struggles of the past? Or is it just politics, to be honest? That comes with fear of a message finding a new home among a once hostile region? Or is it something deeper? A wound Uganda has never healed from. Now, today, I want us to trace the pattern from the rallies to the roadblocks to the death of a driver whose life changed how the nation sees power, and why Bobi Wine's campaigns in northern part of Uganda turned deadly. Welcome to the update. My name is Francis Amukule, and thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the feedback in the comment section. I really appreciate, and please just keep interacting with this content and let me know what else you want us to talk about. Make sure you like and share if you find it interesting. So let's jump right into this particular episode and dive deep in, and let's brace ourselves for impact. Let's go. On the evening of 18th August 2018, on the streets of Arua in the northern part of Uganda, a young man sat quietly inside a black Toyota Tundra. His name was Yasin Kawuma, the driver to the opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, also known as Bobi Wine. Moments later, gunfire erupted. Kawuma was shot dead, actually. And just like that, a campaign rally turned into a national tragedy. Bobi Wine, with several other opposition MPs, had pitched camp in Arua to campaign for a former Forum for Democratic Change member of parliament, Kasiano Wadri, now who was standing at the time as an independent candidate for Arua Municipality seat that fell vacant following the gruesome murder of the former MP Ibrahim Abiriga in June in 2018. Now, on the other hand, President Museveni, Dr. Kizza Besigye were also in Arua to rally votes for their respective candidate. However, it was reported that chaos ensued shortly after Kasiano Wadri and Bobi Wine were having their last campaigns at Arua prisons. So they decided to leave on foot for their hotel, but had an encounter with supporters of Nasuru Tiperu, who was from the rally at Arua Hill grounds with President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Now, following the incident, a car of the presidential motorcade was allegedly hit by a stone. And in fact, a senior presidential press secretary at the time, Don Wanyama, tweeted a photo of Museveni's supposedly bulletproof car with a shattered rear window. I'll put for you the picture here. Here, Wanyama accused the opposition supporters of causing the damage. The security details of President Museveni, in return, in a bid to quell the chaos, fired multiple rounds of ammunition, among which was a stray bullet that ended Yasin Kawuma's life. It is important to note that that moment in Arua didn't just claim one life of Yasin Kawuma. It revealed a deeper and a more disturbing pattern, a recurring cycle of confrontation, violence, and fear that seems to shadow every time Bobi Wine steps in northern part of Uganda. Now today, we unpack that pattern to understand why this region, more than any other region, becomes the most dangerous ground for Uganda's most popular opposition figure. I would love to name this episode Northern Paradox. Now, since joining politics in 2017, Bobi Wine has campaigned across Uganda, from the crowded suburbs of Kampala to distant towns of Gulu, Arua, and Lira. But his northern rallies tell a different story. A story of unusual resistance, not from the people, but from the state. Everywhere he goes in the northern part of Uganda, security forces are already there, waiting. Roadblocks such as arrests and often violence. Now in 2018, it was Arua. In 2020, it was Kitgum and Gulu. In 2021, during the presidential campaign, again, the north became a flashpoint. In Lira, security forces violently broke up a rally, reportedly confiscating the public address system and pepper spraying journalists. One of Bobi Wine's music producers, Sir Dan Magic, was allegedly struck on the forehead with a helmet. Police claimed it was for public order, but footage and eyewitness accounts often told a different story of intimidation, tear gas, and heavy-handed crackdowns. But why? Why does the state respond most aggressively when Bobi Wine campaigns in northern part? Let's look at the historical wounds. The northern part of Uganda carries deep political scars. For decades, it was the heartland of Milton Obote's Uganda People's Congress and also the region that gave Uganda its first post-independence leader. Now, when Museveni took power in 1986, after years of civil war, the northern part of Uganda became a symbol of resistance, home to rebel groups, displacement, and suspicion. Now, for 20 years, the Lord's Resistance Army turned it into a war zone. And even after peace returned, the mistrust never quite disappeared. So when Bobi Wine, a young leader from central Uganda, that is Kampala and Buganda, began drawing massive crowds in Gulu, Kitgum and Arua, it unsettled the state. Now imagine, here was a man bridging the north-south divide. A man who could speak to the war-weary, the forgotten, the youth who grew up in camps. To the state, that was dangerous. To the people, it was hope. Now, let's look at the key turning points that have actually changed the way Bobi Wine's campaigns have drastically taken an interesting turn whenever it goes to the north. Let's go back to 2018. Arua was supposed to be just another by-election. Instead, it became a turning point. On August 18, as campaigns ended, Bobi Wine's convoy was reportedly attacked. Now, security claimed his supporters had stormed the President Museveni's car. But what followed was for us: mass arrests, brutal beatings, and the death of Yasin Kawuma. Images of a battered Bobi Wine being dragged into a military court spread across the world. The government called it enforcement. The opposition called it persecution. To the ordinary Ugandans, it was a painful reminder of how fragile their democracy had become. Now, after Arua, every northern campaign became a security operation, especially for Bobi Wine. What's interesting is that the north is not even Bobi Wine's political base. It's not where he was born, nor where his party began, but it is where his message of liberation has been received with deep emotion. In towns still recovering from decades of conflict, his promise of dignity, jobs, resonates deeply. And perhaps it's what worries those in power, because controlling the north has always been central to controlling Uganda. From Obote's era to Museveni's rule, every leader knows that if you lose the north, you risk losing the country's political balance. So each time Bobi Wine heads north, the state tightened its grip. The police searches aren't random, by the way. They are messages that some boundaries remain forbidden, not to be crossed or tampered with. The pattern of confrontation around Bobi Wine's campaigns isn't just about one man. It's about the state's relationship with dissent, about a system that sees opposition not as part of democracy, but as a threat to be contained. Northern Uganda simply becomes the testing ground where old fears meet new defiance. And that's the paradox. The more the state tries to silence Bobi Wine, and I say this again, that the more the state tries to silence Bobi Wine's voice in the north, the louder it echoes across the nation, unfortunately. I wish the state understood that the smartest way to deal with Bobi Wine would have been just to let him be. And I was listening to some political analysts who say that sometimes these attacks by the police and security operatives, actually the state or the powers that be have nothing to do with them, but are orchestrated by the so-called overzealous police security operatives that think that by stopping Bobi Wine with ruthless hand, with an iron hand, they're actually doing a state a favor to stop him from advancing his cause. Yet the other way, the best way to deal with this would have been actually to just let him be. Just let him be and let the ballot decide later on. But unfortunately, they don't know that that's the concept that works. Let's do a little reflection. I want to think that as Uganda looks to its political future, that is like the 2026 presidential election, the question remains, what happens when power fears change more than it fears injustice? Arua will always stand as a symbol, not just tragedy, but of awakening. For some, Yasin Kawuma's death was a warning. For others, it was the moment they began to believe that freedom in Uganda still demands a price. In the end, the pattern of violence in the northern part of Uganda is not random. It's historical, it's political, and unless it's confronted, it will define how Uganda remembers this generation's struggle for change. My name is Francis Mukule. I hope you guys have enjoyed this particular episode. Give me your thoughts on this. Do you think that Bobi Wine's campaigns in the northern part of Uganda are a little bit more different than the other parts of of Uganda where he goes to do his campaigns? Or is it just me overthinking things? Honestly speaking, I honestly think that the way Bobi Wine's campaigns are being handled by security operatives in the northern part of Uganda are a little more different. I don't know whether is it the nature of the people over there, or is it just exactly what I've stated, that the state is afraid that Bobi Wine is, in one or another, awakening the people that have suffered for the longest time with wounds of war, struggle, and defiance, is reminding them that they have a place at the eating table or a dining, and now is the time, and the state is afraid of that. Let me know in the comment section so that we get this conversation going. See you guys. Bye.